We've decided to sell this house to fund Liam's business. And while we sort things out, we're moving into your apartment, Chloe. You drained our account and hid behind a coward's email?
Open this door or I'll have the locks changed on your life. After every... Effective immediately, all financial support is terminated.
My name is Chloe. I'm 28, and I'm a senior project manager at a major tech firm. After a brutal 12-hour workday, I was finally on my knees fixing the damn leaky pipe under my own sink, looking forward to the moment I could just breathe, maybe even celebrate the big promotion I'd just landed. But then my phone rang. It was my mom. Her first words weren't congratulations. They were, "Don't forget to send your brother the $2,000 for his living expenses this month." $2,000. Suddenly, my promotion felt worthless. In that moment, I wasn't their daughter, just an open wallet. And as I hung up, I had no idea that their casual greed was just the warm-up for a Thanksgiving betrayal that would finally push me to burn it all down. If you've ever felt like the family ATM, tell me where you're watching from. And hit subscribe, because you are going to want to see this. While my family saw me as their personal bank, a reliable utility they could tap into whenever they needed, my professional life was a completely different universe. It was my secret, my escape. At home, I was Chloe, the quiet daughter, the responsible one who always paid up. But at work, I was CJ Reynolds. And CJ Reynolds was a force to be reckoned with. I remember one Tuesday afternoon, standing at the head of a glass-walled conference room 20 floors above the city. The air was thick with the smell of expensive coffee and nervous energy. Around the mahogany table sat the company's executive board. Men and women who held the fate of multi-million-dollar projects in their hands, and they were all looking at me. I was deep into my presentation for Project Titan, a software launch that had been bleeding money and missing deadlines for 6 months before it landed on my desk. I clicked to the next slide, a complex chart of revised timelines and budget reallocations. "As you can see," I said, my voice steady, "by rerouting the development cycle through the alpha phase here and renegotiating the vendor contract here, we not only get back on schedule, but we actually come in 7% under the revised budget." The CFO, a guy notorious for tearing project managers to shreds, leaned forward, squinting at the numbers. He asked a sharp, technical question about server capacity. I didn't flinch. I had the answer ready. I had the answer to the next 3 questions he hadn't even thought of yet. I saw a few of the executives exchange impressed glances. In that room, my opinion mattered. My strategies were valued. My success was my own. It was a feeling I never, ever felt at home. This was my real life, the one I built for myself. One 70-hour work week at a time. My 20s weren't about parties or traveling. They were a montage of takeout containers eaten under the glow of a monitor, of missed calls from my friend Marcus asking if I was ever going to have fun again, of sacrificing my weekends to get ahead of the Monday morning chaos. I did it because I had to. Because I knew, deep down, that this was my only way out. Every project I landed, every promotion I earned, was another brick in the wall I was building around myself. A wall my family couldn't see and couldn't touch. They just saw the monthly transfers into Liam's account. They saw me as their subsidy. They had no idea I was building an empire. Later that week, my boss, David, called me into his office. He gestured for me to close the door. "Chloe," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I just got off the phone with the board. They're not just happy with your work on Project Titan. They're blown away. You didn't just manage that project. You saved it. You saved this company millions." I just nodded, trying to keep my expression professional. This was the praise I always craved from my father. A simple acknowledgement of a job well done. But hearing it from David felt real. It was earned. It wasn't transactional. He slid an envelope across the desk. "This is just a formality," he said. "The official email will come from HR. But we wanted you to know first. Your end-of-year bonus reflects the value you brought to that project. Don't spend it all in one place." I waited until I got back to the quiet of my own apartment that night to open the email. I sat on my couch, the city lights twinkling outside my window. The subject line was simple: "Regarding your Q4 performance bonus." I clicked it open. There was a PDF attachment. I held my breath as the document loaded. My eyes scanned past the corporate jargon until they found it. The number. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. $150,000. $150,000. A number so large it didn't feel real. It was more than my dad made in 2 years before he retired. It was a life-changing amount of money. My secret weapon. I just stared at it, a slow, quiet smile spreading across my face. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my brother, Liam. "Hey sis, can you spot me $2,000? My streaming setup is kinda weak, and I need a new graphics card to be competitive." I looked at the text. Then I looked back at the email with the $150,000 bonus. The absurdity of it all hit me like a punch to the gut. To him, $2,000 was a casual request. To me, it was just another withdrawal from a bank he thought was barely solvent. He had no idea he was asking for pocket change from a millionaire. I felt a familiar flash of anger, but it was different this time. It was cold, calculated. I texted back a simple, "Okay," and I sent him the money from our shared account. But then I did something else. I picked up my phone again, but I didn't open the same banking app. I opened a different one, a private one, secured with facial recognition. An account that my family had no idea existed. With a few taps, I initiated a transfer. The entire bonus, $150,000, moved silently from my corporate account into this secret, untouchable fortress of my own making. I watched the progress bar complete. And then I looked at the new balance, the total amount sitting in that account now. It was enough to disappear. It was enough to start over, anywhere in the world. It was enough to never have to fix a leaky pipe or answer a needy phone call ever again. It was my freedom fund. And my family. They didn't have a clue it even existed. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving felt strange. There was a weird energy coming from my family, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It started with a phone call from my mom. Usually, our conversations were painfully predictable. She'd ask if I was eating enough, complain about my father, and then pivot to Liam's latest financial need. But this call was different. She was asking questions, specific, probing questions. "So, Chloe, how's that big tech job of yours going?" she asked, a little too brightly. "Are you making good money? Do they give you stock options? I was just telling my friend how successful you are." This was new. My mother never acknowledged my success unless she was about to ask for something. Then it got weirder. "And your apartment?" she continued. "It's a 2-bedroom, isn't it? When does your lease end again?" "I just can't remember." I gave her vague answers, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. Why did she care about my lease? She'd never asked about it before, not even when I first moved in. Then Liam started acting friendly. My brother, who typically only contacted me to ask for money, started sending me random texts. "Hey sis, how's it going?" Or, "Saw this funny meme, thought of you." It was so out of character. It was jarring. He even called me one afternoon, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. He asked about my work, my friends, my life. All topics he had shown zero interest in for the past 28 years. He was fishing for something, I could feel it. The whole conversation felt like a performance, like he was reading from a script. I played along, but after I hung up, the feeling of dread intensified. I called my best friend, Marcus. "Something is up with my family," I told him, pacing around my living room. "I don't know what it is, but it feels like the calm before a storm. A really, really big storm. Knee." Marcus tried to reassure me, telling me I was probably just stressed from work. But I knew better. This wasn't stress. This was my survival instinct screaming at me. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and I tried to push my paranoia aside. I spent the entire morning cooking. I made my signature sweet potato casserole with toasted marshmallows, a creamy green bean casserole from scratch, and a pecan pie that had taken me 3 tries to perfect. I packed it all into my car and drove the hour and a half to my parents' house, clinging to a fragile hope that maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year, they would see me. They would appreciate the effort. When I walked in, the house was filled with the familiar smells of roasted turkey and my mother's perfume. My dad was watching football, Liam was on his phone, and my mom was bustling around the kitchen. The fake friendliness continued. Liam actually complimented my casserole. My dad grunted something that sounded like approval. For a fleeting moment, I let myself believe that my anxiety had been for nothing. We sat down to eat, and the conversation was strained but civil. We talked about the weather, about sports, and about a distant cousin's wedding. It was all surface level, all carefully choreographed to avoid any real emotion. I found myself just going through the motions, a quiet observer at my own family's table. After the plates were cleared and the pumpkin pie was served, my father cleared his throat. He tapped his fork against his water glass, a signal for silence he always used when he was about to make a grand pronouncement. The small talk died down. Liam put his phone away and looked at my father expectantly. My mother beamed at him, her hand resting on his arm. A united front. And in that moment, the knot in my stomach returned, colder and tighter than ever. I knew this was it. The storm was here. "Well, everyone," my father began, his voice booming with self-importance, "your mother and I have some very exciting news. As you all know, we've always supported our children in pursuing their dreams." I had to physically stop myself from scoffing. Supported our children? Plural? That was a laugh. He continued, his gaze fixed on my brother. "Liam here has decided to embark on a new business venture, an exciting online enterprise that has incredible potential. But as with any great venture, it requires capital, a solid foundation to build upon." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the words hang in the air. Liam sat up straighter, a smug, self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He looked like a king waiting for his coronation. "Therefore," my father announced, his chest puffed out, "your mother and I have made a decision. We've decided to sell this house." The words hit me first with confusion, then with a sharp pang of something? Sadness, maybe? This was the house I grew up in. But the confusion quickly vanished, replaced by a chilling clarity as he delivered the final blow. "We'll be using the proceeds to provide Liam with the seed money he needs to get his business off the ground. A good start for our son." He smiled, looking around the table as if expecting a round of applause. My mother was practically glowing with pride, nodding along enthusiastically. And then, his eyes landed on me. The smile on his face didn't falter. It just became expectant. "And of course," he said, his tone casual as if discussing the weather, "we'll need a place to stay while things get sorted out. So, we'll just be moving in with you, Chloe." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. A declaration. "Your apartment is plenty big enough for the 3 of us. After all, it's a daughter's responsibility to take care of her parents, isn't it? You're the responsible one. You can handle it." He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, as if my life, my space, my privacy, My entire world were nothing more than a convenient storage unit for them to occupy, while they funded my brother's latest fantasy. Liam didn't even look at me. He was too busy basking in the glory of his new future, a future built on the ashes of my home and financed by my silence. They had planned this, all of them. The weird phone calls, the fake friendliness. It was all a prelude to this moment, this public execution of my independence. They hadn't just decided their lives, they had decided on mine, without ever once thinking to ask me. And that's when I realized, after all the years of sacrifice, of being the reliable one, of funding their lives while I put mine on hold, this was my reward, to become their retirement plan, their live-in landlord, their safety net. It wasn't a family, it was a transaction, and I was on the losing end. At this point, I don't even know what word to use to describe what this feels like. If you are as furious as I am right now, do me a favor. Comment with one word that describes what this family just did. Because as I sat there, listening to the sound of my own heart breaking, that fury began to change into something else. Something cold, something powerful. And they had absolutely no idea what they had just unleashed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my plate against the wall, even though every fiber of my being wanted to. I just sat there, in the wreckage of my Thanksgiving dinner, and a strange sort of calm washed over me. It was the kind of calm that comes after the hurricane has passed, when all you can see is the devastation, and you realize there's nothing left to save. The noise in the room seemed to fade away. My father's booming voice, my mother's sycophantic giggles, my brother's arrogant smirking. It all became a distant buzz. In my mind, a single crystal-clear thought formed. It wasn't angry, it wasn't sad. It was just a fact. It's over. They will never change. This will never stop, unless I stop it. The years of quiet hope, of wishing they would one day see me, of trying to earn their love with achievements and financial support. All of that just evaporated. It was like I had been trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom for 28 years, and I had finally accepted that the bucket was broken. The pain was still there, a dull, heavy ache in my chest. But something new was mixing with it now. Something cold and hard and sharp. It felt like steel. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my fork and knife down on my plate. I folded my napkin and set it on the table. My movements were small, precise, robotic. My mother finally seemed to notice my silence. The triumphant glow on her face flickered with a tiny bit of confusion. "Chloe? Honey, are you okay? You haven't said anything." Her voice was laced with that familiar, patronizing sweetness. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at any of them. I just stared at the floral pattern on the wallpaper behind my father's head. I stood up. The scraping of my chair against the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. "Where are you going?" my father demanded, his tone shifting from celebratory to annoyed. "We're discussing family matters." Family matters. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I finally turned my head, just enough to meet his gaze. My own eyes felt like two chips of ice. "I need some air," I said. My voice was flat, empty. It didn't belong to me. Without another word, I walked to the front door, grabbed my coat and my keys, and left. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly behind me, the click of the latch sounding like the final, definitive end to a chapter of my life. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. The festive lights of other people's homes streaked past my windows, mocking me with their warmth. I wasn't crying. The time for tears was over. I was operating on pure, unadulterated adrenaline and a clarity of purpose I had never felt before. This wasn't a retreat. It was a strategic withdrawal. When I got to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the darkness to my home office, the one sanctuary they hadn't yet invaded. This was my territory, my command center. This was where CJ Reynolds worked. And tonight, CJ Reynolds had one final project to manage: my family. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, the leather cool against my skin, and I went to work. My first call wasn't to a friend, it was to my lawyer, Arthur Vance, a shark in a $700 suit who had helped me navigate some complex corporate contracts. I had his private number for emergencies. This qualified. "Arthur," I said when he picked up, my voice all business. "It's Chloe Reynolds. I apologize for the late hour, but I have a time-sensitive family matter. I need to know the fastest way to legally sever all financial ties and establish a no-contact order." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Chloe," he said, his voice serious. "This sounds heavy. What's going on?" I gave him the 30-second version: the house, the money. The plan is to move in. I relayed it all with the dispassionate efficiency of a field reporter describing a car crash. When I finished, he just said, "I understand. I'll have the necessary paperwork drafted by morning. Don't engage with them. Don't answer their calls. Let everything go through me." The relief was immediate. I had a professional in my corner, a shield. Next, I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen illuminated my face in the dark room. I logged into my bank account, the one my family knew about. The joint account that I had set up years ago as an emergency fund for them had quickly become Liam's personal slush fund. I looked at the balance. It was just over $10,000, the remainder of my last deposit. I navigated to the transfer page. I entered the full amount, every last cent. I typed in the account number for my private high-yield savings account, my fortress. I clicked Confirm. A small green checkmark appeared on the screen. It was done. I had just cut off their supply line. The thought should have made me feel guilty. It didn't. It made me feel powerful. Then I opened a blank document. I started typing. It wasn't a long, emotional letter. There were no accusations, no pleading, no anger. It was an email. Short, direct, and cold as ice. The subject line was, "Regarding future arrangements." The body of the email was just 3 sentences. Effective immediately, all financial support has been terminated. The joint account has been closed. Do not attempt to contact me at my home or my place of work. I attached my lawyer's contact information at the bottom. I read it over once. It was perfect. It was a corporate memo announcing a layoff. I typed in their 3 email addresses and hit send. The little whoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox felt like an exhalation I had been holding in for my entire life. My final call was to Marcus, my rock, my real family. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey you, happy Thanksgiving. How was the family torture session?" His cheerful voice cracked the icy composure I had been maintaining. A single hot tear finally escaped and rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. "Marcus," I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "They did it. They finally did it." I told him everything. The announcement. The plan is to sell the house. The casual, arrogant assumption that I would just take them in. I didn't have to explain the years of backstory. He knew. He had seen it all. He listened patiently, without interrupting. When I was done, there was a long silence. Then he said, his voice low and furious, "Those bastards. I knew they were selfish, but this is a new level." Another pause. "Don't move," he said, his voice firm. "Don't do anything else. I'm on my way. I'm bringing whiskey." I hung up the phone and leaned my head back in my chair. For the first time all night, I allowed myself to close my eyes. The battle plan was in place. The first shots had been fired. Now, all I had to do was wait for the enemy to realize that the war had begun. And I knew they wouldn't make me wait long. They came for me the next morning, just as I knew they would. Marcus had stayed over, sleeping on the couch like a loyal guard dog, but he had just left to get coffee when the hammering on my door began. It wasn't a knock. It was a pounding, an angry, entitled summons that echoed through my apartment. I looked through the peephole, and there they were, the holy trinity of my dysfunction. My father, Robert, stood front and center, his face a mask of thunderous rage. My mother, Susan, stood slightly behind him, her arms crossed, a look of wounded indignation plastered on her face. And Liam. My brother was just leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone, looking bored, as if this was just an annoying errand he had to run before he could get back to his important life of doing nothing. For a moment, I considered not opening the door. I could just ignore them. Let them pound until their knuckles were raw. Let the neighbors call the cops. But no, that would be retreating. And I was done retreating. I took a deep breath, smoothed down the front of my blazer, and opened the door. I had deliberately dressed for war. A sharp navy blue pantsuit, heels that added 2 inches to my height, and my hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. I was CJ Reynolds, not their little girl, not their cash machine. I opened the door and simply stood there, blocking the entrance, my expression completely neutral. The sight of me, so calm and put together, seemed to throw my father off his rhythm. He had clearly expected tears, hysterics, a daughter begging for forgiveness. He didn't get it. "What is the meaning of this?" he boomed, recovering his bluster. He waved his phone in the air, my email presumably glowing on the screen. "You think you can just drain a bank account and send a cowardly email? After everything we've done for you, you have a responsibility to this family." He was trying to use the same old playbook, the same tired lines about duty and responsibility that had kept me in line for my entire life. But the words had lost their power. They were just noise now. My mother chimed in, her voice quivering with theatrical sorrow. "Chloe, how could you? We're your parents. We were counting on you. Your brother was counting on you. You've broken my heart." Liam finally looked up from his phone, a smirk on his face. "Yeah, sis," he drawled. "Kinda messed up. I was already picking out new furniture for my room." The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it all was breathtaking. They hadn't come to talk. They had come to demand, to reinstate their control. They stood there, a unified front of entitlement, so certain of their power, so sure that I would crumble and apologize and put everything back the way it was. They still thought they were in charge. They had no idea the game had already changed. They didn't even know they had already lost. I let the silence hang in the air for a few moments, letting their accusations echo in the hallway. I watched the anger on my father's face curdle into confusion at my lack of response. "Well?" he barked. "Are you going to say anything?" I gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh. I looked at my watch. "Actually, I don't have a lot of time for this," I said, my voice calm, level, and utterly devoid of emotion. "I'm on my way to the airport." The 3 of them exchanged puzzled glances. The airport? This wasn't part of their script. "The airport?" my father repeated, his voice laced with suspicion. "What are you talking about? Where are you going?" This was it. The moment I had been rehearsing in my head all morning, the boom moment. I looked past them, down the long, empty hallway, as if picturing my future. Then I met my father's gaze. I held it, and I dropped the bomb. "I accepted a promotion," I said, my voice clear and ringing with a finality that could cut glass. "A transfer, actually. My company has been planning to open a new Asia-Pacific headquarters, and they've asked me to lead the new division. From Singapore. Singapore. The word just hung there in the space between us. A place so impossibly far away, it might as well have been Mars. I saw the flicker of disbelief in their eyes, the dawning, horrified realization. I leave today, I continued, pressing my advantage. My flight is in 3 hours. I then let my gaze drift over to the packed suitcase and carry-on bag sitting neatly by my entryway. Their eyes followed mine, and I saw the last vestiges of their confidence shatter. This was real. This was happening. My father's face went from red to a pale, blotchy white. You can't, he stammered. Your job is here. Your life is here. Your family is here. I gave a small, cold smile. My career is where I choose to take it, I said. And as for this apartment, I paused, letting them hang on the precipice. I've already signed the lease over. The new tenant is a colleague of mine from work. He and his family are moving in this weekend. I believe he's very excited about the second bedroom. I let that sink in. Their new home. Liam's new bedroom. Gone. Evaporated into thin air. So I'm afraid you'll have to make other arrangements. I finished, my tone polite, as if I were a hotel clerk informing them that there were no vacancies. Good luck with the house sale. I hear the market is a bit slow right now. And with that, I reached behind me, grabbed the handle of my suitcase, and rolled it forward. I stepped out into the hallway, deliberately forcing them to move aside. I didn't look back. I just started walking toward the elevator, the click-clack of my heels on the tile floor sounding like a countdown to my new life. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the silent tectonic shift as their entire world, their carefully laid plans, their future built on my back, crumbled into dust. The rage, the confusion, the dawning, abject panic. It was all radiating from them in waves. But for the first time in my life, their emotions had no power over me. They couldn't touch me. I had built my wall, and now I was walking away from the prison they had tried to build for me. I pressed the elevator button. As the doors slid open, I allowed myself one last glance over my shoulder. And what I saw was a sight I would never forget. 3 people, frozen in a tableau of utter shock and disbelief. Their script was gone. Their power was gone. And they were utterly, completely, and finally on their own. The elevator doors slid shut, encasing me in a cocoon of brushed steel and silence. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the soft whir of the motor and the frantic thumping of my own heart. It was done. The bomb had been dropped. I half expected them to come charging down the stairs to try and physically stop me, but there was nothing. Just a profound, echoing silence from the world I had just left behind. As I rode down to the lobby, I could picture the scene I had left in the hallway. The shock on their faces was slowly morphing into the 5 stages of grief, but skipping straight to anger and denial. My mother was probably the first to speak, her voice a reedy whisper. Singapore? She can't be serious. This is a joke, right, Robert? A cruel, cruel joke. My father, a man who had never been powerless a day in his life, would just be standing there, his mind racing, trying to process how his perfectly crafted plan had just been detonated right in front of him. And Liam was probably already doing the math, realizing that his dream of being a tech mogul, funded by the sale of the family home and subsidized by my income, had just vanished into thin air. By the time I was in the back of a taxi, speeding toward the airport, my phone started to explode. It was a symphony of their panic. First came the calls, one after another. Dad, Mom, Liam, Dad again. I watched their names flash on the screen, a relentless assault on my newfound peace. I didn't answer. I just let it ring, the sound a bizarre confirmation of my victory. When they realized I wasn't going to pick up, the texts started. A flood of digital desperation. They came in so fast my phone was vibrating nonstop against the leather seat. At first, they were questions, still laced with disbelief. My mother. Chloe, please call me. This is a misunderstanding. We can talk about this. My father. You get back here right now. We are not done discussing this. Liam. Seriously, WTF? Are you actually leaving? As the minutes ticked by and the reality of my departure began to sink in, the tone of the messages shifted. The disbelief curdled into pure, unadulterated rage. The manipulation tactics began. This was the part I had been waiting for. The part where they revealed their true selves, stripped of all pretense. The blame game started. My father's texts became short, sharp, and dripping with venom. You have destroyed this family, all your selfishness. I hope you're happy. Did it destroy the family? I thought to myself. An interesting choice of words from the man who was about to make his wife and son homeless to fund a pipe dream. Then came the guilt trips from my mother. Her messages were long, rambling paragraphs filled with self-pity and historical revisionism. After all the sacrifices I made for you, I gave you everything. How can you be so ungrateful? So cruel to your own mother? I never thought I raised a monster. Sacrifices? The only sacrifice I could remember was the one I made every single month when I transferred a chunk of my hard-earned salary into their account. And Liam. Oh, Liam. His messages were a masterclass in narcissistic delusion. You're just jealous, one read. You're jealous that Dad was finally going to invest in me instead of you. You couldn't stand to see me succeed. Succeed? He hadn't succeeded at anything in his entire life that wasn't paid for by someone else. Another text followed. You've ruined my life, my one big chance, and you ruined it. You owe me. He actually thought I owed him. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. They weren't sorry. They weren't hurt. They were angry that the ATM had been shut down. They were furious that their property had decided to walk away. They weren't mourning the loss of a daughter or a sister. They were mourning the loss of their asset. I read each message with a strange sense of detachment, like a scientist observing a colony of ants in a frenzy. This was who they were. This was the truth, raw and unfiltered. Every word they typed was another justification for my decision, another piece of evidence that I had done the right thing. As the taxi pulled up to the international terminal, a new text from my father came through. This one was different. It wasn't just angry. It was a threat. If you get on that plane, don't ever bother coming back. You will be dead to us. You will have no family. Dead to them. The words should have stung. They should have broken my heart. But they didn't. Instead, a wave of profound relief washed over me. It was a promise. A gift. A clean break. I paid the driver, grabbed my suitcase, and walked into the bright, cavernous terminal. The air buzzed with the energy of 1,000 different journeys. People were saying hello, saying goodbye, heading off to new adventures. For the first time, I felt like one of them. I found a quiet spot near my gate overlooking the tarmac. My plane was already there, a sleek, beautiful machine that represented my future. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from my mother. It was a picture. A photo of me as a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, smiling gap-toothed at the camera, holding my father's hand. Underneath it, the caption read, "I miss this little girl. What happened to her?" It was the final, desperate gambit, the emotional nuclear option, an attempt to weaponize my own childhood against me. The little girl in that picture had spent her whole life trying to please them. She had contorted herself into knots, buried her own needs, and accepted their scraps of affection as if they were a feast. She had done her time. She had served her sentence. And now, she was finally free. I looked at the picture. Then, with a steady hand, I opened my contacts. I found my father's name. I tapped block this caller. A confirmation popped up. I pressed block contact. Then I did the same for my mother. And for Liam. One by one, I erased them from my digital life. I watched their names disappear from my contact list, a simple act that felt monumental. It was a silent declaration of independence, a final, definitive line drawn in the sand. I was no longer their daughter. I was no longer their sister. I was just Chloe. And Chloe was getting on a plane to Singapore. My phone fell silent. The frantic buzzing was replaced by a quiet hum. The silence was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Blocking their numbers was just the first step. It was a necessary, tactical move to stop the immediate assault. But true freedom, I was quickly learning, wasn't just about silence. It was about building a new life, a new support system, a new definition of family from the ground up. As the plane ascended, banking over the coastline and leaving the country I had always called home behind, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilarating freedom. For the first time, there was no safety net, but for the first time, there were also no strings. Before the flight attendants told us to switch to airplane mode, I sent one final message, not to them, but to Marcus. It was just 3 words. The eagle has flown. A minute later, a reply came back. Godspeed, Eagle. Your real family is waiting for you on the other side. Marcus was my first pillar, my chosen brother. He was the one who had sat with me in the dark of my apartment, pouring whiskey into a coffee mug while I lay out my battle plan. He didn't question my decision. He didn't tell me I was being too harsh. He just listened. And when I was done, he looked me in the eye and said, "It's about damn time. What do you need me to do?" He was the one who helped me pack the last essential boxes, who dealt with the logistics of shipping my life across the ocean. When we stood at the airport curb, he pulled me into a fierce hug. "You did the right thing, Chloe," he whispered. "Don't you ever doubt that. Call me any time, day or night. It doesn't matter what time it is in Singapore. You call." That hug, that unconditional support, was more real and more valuable than any "I love you" my own parents had ever muttered. My second pillar was someone I never expected. My boss, David. A few days after I landed in Singapore, jet-lagged and overwhelmed, he scheduled a video call. I expected it to be all business, a rundown of Q1 objectives and project deadlines. But he started the call differently. "Chloe," he said, his expression serious. "Forget about work for a minute. How are you?" Really, I know that a move like this quickly, usually has a story behind it. You don't have to tell me what it is. I just want you to know that the company is behind you 100%. We hired you because you're the best. Whatever you need, an advance, help with housing, an introduction to a good lawyer, you just say the word. The professionalism, the respect, the simple human decency of it all. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic, selfish demands of the people who were supposed to care about me most. He saw my value, not as a resource to be exploited, but as a person to be supported. And then, there was the new family I started to build in Singapore, my new team. I had expected a professional, perhaps even cold, welcome. Instead, I found a group of people who were warm, brilliant, and genuinely excited to have me there. On my first Friday, a senior engineer named Kenji approached my desk. "Hey, Chloe," he said with a friendly smile. "A few of us are going out for satay and beers after work to celebrate our new boss. You in?" I was so taken aback by the simple, uncomplicated invitation that I just stared at him for a second. There was no hidden agenda, no expectation of anything in return, just a genuine offer of camaraderie. That night, sitting at a bustling hawker center, surrounded by the sounds and smells of my new home, laughing with my new colleagues, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. This was community. This was a connection. It wasn't based on obligation or blood. It was based on shared experience and mutual respect. But the final test, the final boundary, came about a week later. They found a way through. My father, ever the strategist, must have realized he couldn't get to me directly. So he went through my lawyer. Arthur called me one morning. "Chloe," he said, his voice grim, "I've just received an interesting email. It's from your father's attorney." My blood ran cold. "What does it say?" I asked. Arthur took a deep breath. "It's a proposal. He's offering a deal. He says that if you agree to reinstate a reasonable monthly family stipend, his words, and co-sign a business loan for your brother for $50,000, they will graciously forgive your recent emotional outburst and allow you to re-enter the family fold." I was speechless. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it. They weren't apologizing. They were negotiating. They were treating our relationship like a hostile takeover. They were trying to buy me back, to put a price tag on my compliance. The old Chloe would have considered it. The old Chloe would have felt the crushing weight of guilt and obligation. She would have wondered if maybe $50,000 was a small price to pay for peace. But the old Chloe was gone. For the first time in my life, I didn't hesitate. I didn't second-guess myself. I didn't feel a single flicker of doubt. "Arthur," I said, and my voice was as steady as stone. "Please reply to them with the following message, and I want you to use these exact words. All future correspondence will be marked as harassment. The only way I will ever engage with you again is through a court order. This is not a negotiation. This is my final word." There was a moment of silence on the line, and then I heard Arthur let out a low whistle. "Message received, Chloe," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Loud and clear. After I hung up, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out at the incredible, futuristic skyline of Singapore. I had done it. I had said no. Not just no for now, but no forever. I had chosen myself. For the first time in my entire life, I had truly, completely, and unapologetically chosen myself. This was a turning point, a moment that defined everything that came after. If you support this powerful decision, if you're cheering for her right now like I am, drop a flexed bicep emoji in the comments to send her some strength for the journey ahead. Because that strength, that sense of unwavering self-worth, was exactly what she was going to use to build an entirely new world for herself. 2 years have passed since that Thanksgiving. 2 years since I got on a plane and chose myself. My life today is almost unrecognizable from the one I left behind, and I mean that in the best way possible. I'm standing on my balcony now, 25 floors up, looking out at the incredible, sprawling city of Singapore. The air is warm and humid, and the city hums with a vibrant energy that matches my own. I'm no longer just CJ Reynolds, the project manager. I'm Chloe, and Chloe is happy. Genuinely, peacefully happy. My career has flourished here in a way I never dreamed possible. My team shattered every single one of our targets last year. But more importantly, I've built a life. I have friends, my chosen family, who I travel with, laugh with, and lean on. I'm even dating someone, a wonderful man named Ben, who celebrates my successes instead of seeing them as a resource. Life is good. It's calm. It's mine. I do hear things sometimes, whispers from a distant aunt who still emails me on my birthday. She told me my parents had to sell the house, but for much less than they had hoped. The market had turned, and without my income to float them, they had to take the first lowball offer they got. They now live in a small 2-bedroom rental apartment an hour outside the city. My father's grand retirement dreams were apparently the first casualty, and Liam, my brother, the aspiring entrepreneur, had his wings clipped by reality. Without my parents' house to sell for his seed money, and without my monthly stipend, he had to do something he hadn't done in his entire adult life. He had to get a job. He's a manager at a Starbucks now. According to my aunt, he complains about it constantly, but he's paying his own bills. For the first time. It seems the greatest gift I ever gave him wasn't my money, it was my absence. About 6 months ago, I received an email that made my heart stop for a second. The sender was Liam. I almost deleted it without opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. The email wasn't a request for money. It wasn't angry. It was an apology. A real one. He told me about his job, about how hard it was to deal with angry customers and manage inventory. He wrote about the exhaustion of working a double shift just to make rent. And then he wrote the words I never thought I would read. I get it now, Chloe, the email said. I never understood what you were doing because I never had to. I took it all for granted. Everything. I was a selfish brat, and I am so sorry for my part in how we treated you. You didn't deserve any of it. I read that email over and over. It was the first honest communication I had ever received from him. I replied a few days later. It was a short, polite email. I told him I appreciated his words and that I wished him well on his new path. I accepted his apology, but I didn't offer to reopen the door. Because an apology, even a sincere one, doesn't erase the scars. It's a bandage, not a time machine. We don't talk, but there's a quiet understanding now. A peace forged from distance and a harsh dose of reality. Looking back, I realized that walking away wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of creation. I had to burn down the toxic structure of my old life to build a new one founded on self-respect. I learned that my value isn't determined by how useful I am to other people. It's inherent. It's mine. I learned that financial independence isn't just about money. It's the ultimate form of freedom. It's the power to say no. And most importantly, I learned that family isn't about blood. It's not about obligation. Real family is the people who choose you, the ones who show up, who lift you, and who celebrate you, not for what you can give them, but for who you are. I lost a family that was weighing me down, but in doing so, I found myself. And that's a trade I would make again, 1,000 times over. This journey has been the hardest and most rewarding of my life, and I know I'm not the one who's been through it. So, I want to ask you all, have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family members who took you for granted? How did you navigate that painful but necessary conversation? Share your experience in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can support each other. And if this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice. And share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself. Thank you for listening.